Shifting the gear to the conflict in Ukraine, after this Kursk, Kursk incursion, and what do we know about the Ukrainian army right now? And how's the situation with their army, in your opinion?
Well, I think, the situation has just worsened. Just if we look at the line, the front line, if you want, we see that by extending the front line by 150 kilometers or so, the Ukrainians are not able to create a sufficient concentration of force to resist the Russian pressure. So that's one thing. So the decision to engage Kursk was probably not stupid per se, but it was not consistent with the actual capabilities of the Ukrainian forces at this point of time. And as a result, they have simply just extended their line of front, and they have lost additional troops. They've probably lost something like 12,000 people in the Kursk area since last month, since the beginning of this offensive on the 6th of August. They have lost a lot of tanks and armored vehicles, and they have lost them in place because the Kursk area is not an area where you can use armored vehicles. It's not suited for that. It's more infantry for terrain for infantry warfare. As a result, the added value of tanks in the Kursk area was not very big, and therefore the Ukrainians have lost valuable assets in Kursk that they could have used more usefully in the area of Pakrovsk, for instance, or probably behind Pakrovsk to make some kind of counteroffensive force, to prepare a counteroffensive force behind Pakrovsk, for instance. So this is the lack of operational thinking and the lack of strategic thinking in the Ukrainian army, which is explained by the fact that since the beginning of this the Russian military operation in February 2022, we see that the command and control of the Ukrainian army is led by the politics and not by the military, as opposed to the Russians. In Russia, you see that the command and control is very clearly a military command and control type of command. While on the Ukrainian side, we see that a lot of operations have been launched just for the sake of providing a political message or public relation, even if we can put it that way. Remember these different attempts to cross the Dnieper River in Grinky that happened end of last year, beginning of this year. You had various attempts to take the famous Snake Island, which has absolutely zero military value, but it was deemed as important for the Ukrainian leadership, and they lost a lot of troops just for nothing, basically. The same as the attempts for creating a landing on the beaches of Crimea with some special force or commando units. They were decimated and destroyed on those beaches, but just for the sake of putting the flag of Ukraine on the Crimean beach. So we don't see exactly the point of these attacks. They just created victims, and these soldiers were just killed for simply nothing, for just having a public relation type of message, but that's all. This was not any operational landing or something that you could have expected, like in Normandy in 1944. Nothing like that. It was very much a simple self self-defined operation. You just land there, period. You just plant the flag, and that's it. So what's the purpose? And that's a little bit what we can see with the Kursk offensive. At the end of the day, they probably had more bigger ambitions when they started the operation, and because they noticed that this area was not very strongly defended, and they probably hoped to reach the Kursk nuclear power plant, probably to achieve some kind of deal. I don't know if it was the end goal of this operation, but they had probably more ambitious objectives than just staying in the border area. But they didn't manage to reach the Kursk area. At the end of the day, they never go further than 20 kilometers inside of Russian territory. As a result, this operation was almost self-defeating, because you just take territory which is not very strongly inhabited. Suja, which is the biggest city in this area, has something like 5,000 or 6,000 inhabitants. Most of them have been evacuated, by the way. So what's the gain? You just have a piece of territory that is so tiny that you can barely talk about any, you use that as a bargain chip for any kind of negotiation, because it's so tiny. And in addition to that, fighting in this area, because apparently the Kursk area, this tiny piece of territory, is more important for the Ukrainians than it is for the Russians. I mean, I'm not saying it's not important for the Russians, but for the Russians, it's something somehow, one day or another, they will regain. So they are not in a hurry to keep that, to regain that, sorry. While on the Ukrainian side, they consider this piece of territory of strategic value, because they imagine that they could use that as a bargaining chip in the future negotiation. So for them, it's very important. As a result, the Ukrainians tend to invest more resources into the Kursk area than the Russians do. And that's probably the reason why the Russians are probably not so in a hurry to regain that territory, because in fact, it tends to drag Ukrainian resources in this territory, and those resources are destroyed systematically. As a result, maintaining this Kursk battle, if you want, helps to weaken the rest of the front line. And we see, and that was this